Today I'm going to be learning more about Polish military and in particular Polish military history, specifically World War II, and this is what did the Polish do on D-Day, Poland's contribution to Normandy in 1944. So of course D-Day is one of the most important days of World War II. I want to watch this because, as I've said on previous videos, I feel like Poland's role in World War II is very underrated, not given as much respect as it deserves. And yeah, I just want to learn about it. So let's watch this. You can tell me what you think about it too. Let's watch.
One of the most pivotal moments of the Second World War was D-Day and the following Normandy landings that would lead to the Allied recapture of much of occupied Europe. On D-Day, the three nations most involved with the taking of the beaches in Normandy were the United States, the United Kingdom and its empire, and particularly the Canadians, who were responsible for taking Juno Beach. However, as I mentioned in the video that I uploaded previously about the Dutch contribution at D-Day, there were many smaller nations that also took part in the fighting on land, in the air, and on the high seas. And today's video, I'd like to talk about a nation that really doesn't deserve to be called a small nation when it comes to the Second World War, and that is to talk about Poland and the contribution of Polish soldiers in the fighting around D-Day. So of course the Poles were there at the very beginning of the Second World War in Europe. In 1939 it was the invasion of Poland that would bring Britain and France into open war against the Germans. Now the Poles had their hands full fighting against the Germans, and soon after they were also invaded by the Soviets in the east. Despite a gallant defense against their enemies, they proved too strong for the Poles to fight against. However, that wasn't the end of the story for the Polish armed forces, as many of them were able to escape occupied Poland and would go on to fight again in the Battle of France and then in several other Allied campaigns in North Africa, Italy, and indeed in Normandy. Of all the nations on the Allied side after the Soviet Union, the United States, and the United Kingdom, it was the Poles who had the most people fighting in their armed forces, be that the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, or in resistance groups. And the Poles could be found in many different campaigns in all of these branches, fighting alongside the British, with many Poles being stationed in Britain. Of course, they also played a very important role in intelligence, with the Polish Home Army or resistance movement in Poland itself often supplying crucial information to the Allied, such as also the Enigma machine that the Allies would then later use and crack to decode German secret messages. Now, the Poles were very important on D-Day. By March of 1944, it's estimated there were around 195,000 Polish servicemen and women in the United Kingdom fighting alongside the British and their allies. Some 20,000 of these were in the Polish Air Force, which was under the command of the Royal Air Force, and some 3,000 were fighting on board Polish ships, which were under the command of the Royal Navy. Let's begin by taking a look at the Polish Air Force and their contributions on D-Day. Perhaps the biggest moment for the Polish Air Force wasn't on D-Day, but 4 years earlier, during the Battle of Britain, when the Germans attempted to destroy the RAF so that they could invade mainland Britain. The Polish 303rd Squadron claimed the most kills during the Battle of Britain. This was despite the fact that they actually joined the fighting 2 months after many of the other squadrons had already engaged the Germans, racking up some 126 confirmed kills. Apart from 303rd Squadron, it was said by Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, the head of RAF Fighter Command, that had it not been for the magnificent material contributed by the Polish squadrons and their unsurpassed gallantry, I hesitate to say that the outcome of the battle would have been the same. Polish airmen would also have a role to play during D-Day, with 11 out of 16 Polish air squadrons in the RAF taking part on the day itself and the following campaign. They would largely be in charge of protecting the landing fleet from enemy aircraft, although they would also fire on enemy submarines, sinking several U-boats or being involved in hindering U-boat actions, as well as targeting German logistics and supplies. In particular, 305 Squadron was famous for a very successful hit on an enemy fuel depot in Nancy in the north of France, where they managed to destroy some 13 million litres of fuel. This was heralded by the papers at the time as the Polish victory in the Battle of France.
Yeah, so already we're seeing like how important Poland was, and that's what I was saying on previous videos. When I grew up, learning about history in school, especially about World War II, is more focused on Britain, the USA. And when you see Poland's role, not just in the Battle of Britain in the UK, but in France, at home in Poland, you see the number of soldiers that were provided. Poland's role is so important, it deserves more respect.
The second time, of course, that the Poles had fought in the battle for France, though this time they would be on the winning side. The Polish Navy also played a role during D-Day, with ORP Dragon, which had formerly been HMS Dragon and then in 1943 was given over to the Polish Navy, providing support for two Polish smaller ships, the ORP Ślązak and the ORP Krakowiak, who would be involved in firing on batteries, German batteries on the coast before the landings took place. The Polish army under British command would also play a role, but not on D-Day itself, however during the Normandy campaign. In particular, of note is Stanisław Maczek, who was a Polish general who was a veteran of the First World War, of the Polish-Ukrainian War, and the Polish-Soviet War. He had fought in Poland and then again in the 1940 Battle of France. After that, he retreated with the British Army and went to Edinburgh, where there are still several statues of him. In Scotland, he formed the 1st Armoured Division, which would later be shipped to Normandy. Their big moment came during the fighting around the Falaise Pocket, which was formed when elements of the 7th Army and several panzer divisions were trapped by the advancing Allies just south of Caen, but put up strong resistance. During this period of fighting, the Poles were involved in two areas. To the north, where Zgorzelski's brigade and Kosciuszki's brigade were fighting around Gudach, and in the south, where Loszucki's brigade was fighting around Chambois. The Poles proved to be very important during this fighting, which involved American, British and Canadian forces, as well as those of several other nations, including the Free French. Field Marshal Bernard Law Montgomery, the hero of Alamein, noted that the Germans were in a bottle and the Polish division was like a cork, which we capped them with. After this, the Polish would also be very important in the liberation of several parts of France, as well as of the port towns of Belgium and the Netherlands. As you can see, they made a very strong advance up the northern coast, fighting in many of the most important battles in the Low Countries, and this is why they are particularly remembered, including General Maczek, on street names and with statues, such as this one in Belgium and this monument in the Netherlands, which may look like it's a modern art kind of sculpture, but it's actually the symbol of the 1st Polish Armed Division, which is based on the winged hussars and the shape of the Husaria, which you can see here on this monument from Normandy, which commemorated the 1st Polish Armed Division. And indeed, General Maczek, when he died in 1994, was buried in Breda at the cemetery where many other Poles who've died during the liberation of the Netherlands were buried. Alright everyone, thank you very much for watching this video about the history behind the Polish contribution to D-Day and a little bit further about the Poles fighting in the campaign in Normandy and the rest of Europe to free the people there from German occupation. Let me know if you enjoyed this video. Would you? Yeah,
brilliant video. Go subscribe to that channel. But yeah, that again, like, even that I didn't really realise how much other countries Poland was involved in different operations as well. So that's very enlightening for me. Again, it just actually really emphasises how important Poland was. Obviously we know how the war started with that invasion, but Poland was just consistently helping the Allies, or being a big part of the success of the Allies throughout the whole war, in all over Europe as well. And it makes it even sadder that obviously I learned on one of the previous videos that in the UK we had a victory march and I think Poland wasn't invited. So I feel like that's one of the biggest disappointments for me being British. Like, if anybody should have been invited, it should have been the Polish, having seen what they suffered, and not just that, just how much they actually helped the Allies as well. So excellent, very interesting. Tell me what you think about that. Tell me if you knew that as well, and yeah, recommend any other videos about the Polish military. Thanks.